All right, welcome back to the program. Joining me right now is the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics, Tope Fasua. Okay. Let's take you through what we're discussing right now. Okay, we're looking at FG's plans to slash salaries, or like they say, harmonize. Welcome to you, Tope Fasua.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
What's the difference between harmonization and cuts? Because let's start from that basics, because, you know, this was in the news just a few days ago. It's been in the news, really. And I think, was it the next day? They said, we want to harmonize. So that's why I said, let me use their term, harmonize. What's the difference, really? Harmonize, reduction, cut, trim. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you hear me saying, because it's a big issue, a massive, massive issue, but an issue of interest all the same, you know. The federal government once said, look, okay, we think our wage bill is too high. We need to do something about it. I think we'll have to cut down some of the wages. And people say, what do you mean by that? The NLC went daggers drawn immediately. Inside this dry season, you want to cut people's wages. Then the minister came and said, well, you know, the whole thing you mentioned about harmonization.
What do you mean by dry season? We're in wet season, you know.
Hell, well, you're in wet season, but it's dry in people's pockets, you know. And see, okay, so the point is this. It's a very, very, very big issue. I feel, like I was telling you earlier, that the only time this government could have done it was in 2015 when they came. But invariably, I think they didn't have a handle on what they wanted to do. So everybody slept on it. It's way too late now. It can't happen again. Cutting, cuts, they can't do it. It's a joke. See, so cutting the wage level, the point is that out of the 7 trillion that government intends to raise by way of revenue this year, 5.4 trillion is going on salaries. All right? I mean, let that sink in. 5.4 trillion rather is going on salaries and wages out of 7 trillion that they intend to raise. Then you're going to have to, so out of the 13 trillion budget, 0.5 trillion budget, only 7 trillion plus will be raised as revenue. About 5 trillion plus will be raised as debt. About 1 trillion will be raised as gifts and grants from different parts of the world. What a budget. So when you are raising, when you see that you're having to borrow, what you're having to borrow abroad fully, all right, the entire borrowing from abroad, okay, you can just transfer it and use it to pay salaries. That's what it is right now. So you see how the situation is. So that's why the government is panicking. And mind you also, there's another very dangerous phenomenon going on. Level 12 officers and below have been sitting at home doing nothing. And it seems like the system is not missing them.
So
you understand?
So
I think that's part of why they're thinking maybe we should let people go. But you can't let people go in this kind of scenario. So I've been of the opinion that you should be thinking about repurposing staff. And this is a good time to think about that. Last week I wrote in newspapers, El-Rufai also wants to lay off people. I'm thinking, Kaduna, you know, I heard he's done a few things in infrastructure, but there's got to be a whole lot of things to do in Kaduna rather than laying off people that you can repurpose them. Look, we still need millions of teachers in this country. Now, what she means by harmonization is even a bigger issue, which they never dealt with. In the same civil service, public service, whatever it is they call it, okay? There are people who are working in lucky parastatals who are earning 20 times at the same level, 20 times more than their colleagues in what they call the core civil service. The government slept on that. So you are grade level 9 or 10, working in a lucky parastatal, and you're working on with maybe 2 million every month or 3 million every month. I won't mention their names, they know themselves, you know. And then the person, and you know, the last time I checked, in the real civil service, core civil service, the highest paid person earns 5.4 million in a year, which is the director grade level 17, step 9. So by the time you divide that by 12 and take out taxes, the man is barely getting 400,000. That's a director that has put in maybe 33 years in services, only 2 years to go. Then you begin to ask yourself, how are they able to send their children to all those wonderful schools abroad? That, you know, one semester's fee is more than the entire thing they are earning in a whole year, or even more than that. You know, so what she's saying by harmonization is to see, she was saying, and I read it extensively, that they would like to close the gap between that salary. So that means they're going to be chipping off. So when you hear some of these, the labor leaders that are speaking, for example, if you're a Joe Ajero who's in the oil sector, these guys are very comfortable. Okay, those ones, if they are complaining, they are not complaining for the people in the core civil service who are earning almost next to nothing, you know. So an assistant director is earning barely 120,000 every month. If you are lucky, maybe, depending on where you are, 150,000. And you say they shouldn't be corrupt. So you can see that there are several problems within the service that they need to deal with. Where do you find the money to meet this wage bill?
How do you harmonize and all of that? On what you said earlier, it wasn't lost on me because I also thought about it, especially during the COVID period. And I know not many civil servants have even resumed.
Oh, yeah.
What does it really tell us? Does it really mean that Nigeria can really run on the kind of engine?
Invariably.
I even spoke to a few friends in some parastatals and they were like, I tried to ask them even earlier this year, they said they've not resumed fully, that perhaps in the department they will have 3, 4, 5 people. And the work is going on. And they were like, so can they really carry out their duty even without many people? And normally that would be a department of 30, 40, 50 people. And now he's running on like 4, 5, 6, 7
Major
people.
issue.
So how should we tackle that?
Major issue. I mean, what it tells you is that, you see, I've always said that we need more. I say, let me say this, it's a bit controversial. People find it difficult to understand my train of thought and so on, but I'll say it all the same. Nigeria needs we need a bigger civil service. Yes, we do. We don't even have any. Yes. The only problem is we don't need them in the federal secretariats or the state secretariats or local government secretariats. We don't. Okay, if you have 15 million children out of school roaming around and carrying plates and all of that, you need a whole new social services sector. A massive social services sector. In the social services sector, social workers in the United States, 680,000 of them. And they don't have the problem that we have with children out of school. And what they do is they pair them up with 6, 7 children and say, every day you wake up, your job is to visit these 6 children and make sure that they're going to school, they're doing well, they're not being abused by anyone, they're getting fed and all of that. That is your work. That is how a society guarantees its future. The reason why we're here today, those calling for secession, the ones, headsmen disturbing people, this and that, the country is so loose, all sorts of foreigners come in and terrorize our people and all of that, is because that government, over time, successive governments, have not been honest and they have not actually thought about the real issues and tried to actually solve the problems. If you have 15 million children out of school, you need an entire social services sector. You need hundreds of thousands of Nigerian youths to be taking care of that problem, taking those children out of school. You need millions of teachers in school to be teaching them. And they're not going to be employed by the private sector. It's not a bankable business per se, if you ask me. You don't push everything to the private sector, so private sector is to go and create it. No, it is the role of government to ensure full employment. In any kind of economics you read, the role of private sector at the end of the day is to make money, to privatize, to maximize profit, and that's their work. Okay, you don't beg the private sector, please create job for me. Look at it. If government itself can do without grade level 12 and below, is it private sector that will employ more people? Okay, of course you have to keep paying them. That tells you that productivity is not increasing. But again, you then ask yourself, even if they were going to work, are they not going to work to form impediment to transactions? Because after all, they are not there and transactions seems to be going fine. You know what I'm saying? However, it is totally politically impossible for you to say, okay, since we're not going to pay you anymore, sit at home. But government is finding it increasingly difficult to even meet up the wage bill. Now, especially at the state level.
Let's talk about the budget padding. Last week, Budget came up with a report. In fact, I interviewed the founder of Budget last Thursday, I guess. Shewoni was here. Okay. Yes, and over 19,036 projects, about 316 projects were being duplicated. In that report, they talked about misalignment, they talked about budget padding, what do they even call it? Okay, budget padding. They also, okay, that's payroll padding. They talked about quite a whole lot of things. That in fact, from the report, I saw that across ministries or across departments and agencies, this same project is here, costing millions or billions of naira. This same project is here, costing millions and billions of naira. How does that translate to also what the government is saying? So can the government check itself?
Exactly.
And will there be a need to cut staff? Because it seems that so many frivolous items are even in the budget, which the minister has spoken about.
Have they reacted to what budget has said? Have they reacted? Have they taken out those 316 items, for example? And if you're not taking them out, are you justifying why those 316 items need to be there? Duplicated items. It's not today. We're not even talking about the fact that all the ministries, departments, everybody works as silos. Everybody builds their own infrastructure, you know, where you can use one generator for 2 departments and so on. They rather buy 2. And at the end of the day, and we're back to how the budget is being made. It's still, you know, we came in 2015, they said, no, zero-based budgeting, blah, 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 blah. Of course, all of that has gone, you know. Now we are back to the envelope system where you are sitting in your office, they bring a letter from budget office and say, what do you want to buy next year? That's when you call your secretary and say, Madam, don't you think we need a new official car next year? Say, Madam, say, yes, it's good. Oga needs a new official car next year. In fact, we need to build you know, Sheikh Madeni was served in government, he wrote about this. Ruben Abati served in government, came out, he wrote about this.
But it was happening also during their time. They said, well, it was happening during their time.
In their time now, yes. I'm talking about
insider report was in 2011.
Insider information is what I'm saying. That look, empirically, they came out and said, Shago said he was sitting in his office in the villa when they brought this letter. And there was saying, what will we spend on? What will we spend on? I think it'd be good to have a press center in Katsina so that when Oga goes to Katsina, you know, you can always address people from there. Of course, they never built it. They never built it because he said, number one, Yaradua never stayed in Katsina overnight. He always want to come back and all of that. And of course, he got ill and then that was the end. But even the moment they sent in whatever it is they wanted, the next thing was contractors started to show up who had information about what they had put in their budget. To say, look, so that's your budget, so we can help you to execute the I mean, we're back to that era now where it's a case of envelope system. This is how much you have to spend it. How you spend. Who's talking about the efficiency of that spending?
How about ghost workers?
How about ghost workers?
Because it seems that ghost workers.
We're not even talking about that anymore. Kemi Adeosun came and said a number of things about ghost workers and so on.
They've eliminated them.
But invariably, in fact, there was once when when that same rhetoric was hijacked by Garba Shehu. You know, I'm a journalist myself, so we write about it. They say a journalist is a historian in a hurry. So we're writing history even before it's made. You know, but Garba Shehu hijacked that rhetoric and said, and it was, I wrote then that, look, why is Garba Shehu interjecting into this issue of ghost worker? Let Kemi Adeosun do the work if you can, because she said that they had caught some people. They now said there were 6 or 8 people in the payroll office who they had arrested. I said, no, it cannot be 6 people making, how much? I remember that it was 13 billion every month that they found. I said, and nobody knows what has happened to that. What's wrong with us? Look. It's just terrible in this country. The world is moving on. I wrote an article yesterday which I titled, "A Boom is Coming." An economic boom is coming. The world is priming for the economic boom that comes after a pandemic, a war, a crisis, and so on. Where is Nigeria? We're not going to be ready, okay? We're not going to be ready. Because these are the kind of rubbish that we're going to be doing at the end of the day, you know, just deceiving ourselves. There are no resources enough for us to even achieve anything for ourselves. So back again, please, Nancy, before I land, to say that, look, the excess that we're seeing, they should think of repurposing. We need, the civil service hasn't started. I did several analyses in the past. If you go to the Scandinavian countries, 30-35% of workers work for the government, okay? Honestly, okay? In the United Kingdom, 21% of all workers work for the government. The biggest employer is the National Health Service, which employs about 2.1 or 1.7 million people. In the United States, 17% of workers work for the government. The biggest employer is the Department of Defense, okay, because of all these, bases that they have all over the place. The U.S. is basically a military country. That's what they are, And when you begin to see the kind of low numbers, like in Nigeria now, maybe 4% or 3% of workers work for government. You see that in failed states. You go to Afghanistan, you see something like that. Meaning that the underpinning, if you like, the bureaucratic underpinning on which private sector businesses can thrive has not been built. And it's a lot of investment. It's a lot of investment to close your eyes and say, look, we need teachers, we must pay teachers, we must find the money to pay teachers even before we pay ourselves as government. It's a lot of investment. If you are leaving those children on the street, it's a lot of investment. We're not talking about education alone. The educational sector could take millions more people. The health sector, we never did anything about primary health in this country, even through COVID. The security sector, look at where we are today. Under-policed, under-resourced. Too few people living in places like SSS and co. That is why we have a security problem. Because security rises and falls on the level of intelligence that you have. Okay,
let me cut you now. Let's bring in this interview that I had with the former DG of BPSR, Dr. Joaba. I had him some time ago, a few months ago, and we talked about this. In fact, the Orosaya report, which we'll come back to after this. Let's quickly take this, what Dr. Abba told me just a few months ago about all the stuff that we're discussing again.
It's now more important than ever to actually implement that report. But there are various aspects of the report. It's not just about abolishing agencies or merging agencies. There are a number of organizations that report said government should no longer be funded through the budget. There are a number of organizations where their enabling laws need to be amended. There are a number of agencies that should be commercialized. So agencies like the Nigerian Postal Service shouldn't really be receiving provisions from the national budget. There are other agencies that could benefit from a merger, like NTA and Voice of Nigeria. There are a number of agencies that simply have too many people. So if you look at the new Partnership for Africa's Development Agency, the NEPAD agency, as an example, the NEPAD headquarters in South Africa has only 27 staff. NEPAD Nigeria has over 200. That is the kind of imbalance that we're looking at. So yes, I think now the opportunity of I think the pandemic is actually an opportunity to take certain difficult decisions, because the government simply can no longer afford to carry the number of agencies that it currently has and the staffing of some of those agencies. A lot of the expenses on governance is actually on staffing. Okay, so a majority of the expenses are on staffing. However, the public service is not necessarily balanced in terms of staffing. So you find some agencies that have too many and some agencies that have too few. And you have some agencies that have particular skills and some agencies that are lacking in those skills. So I think if you bring the unions into this early, the unions themselves would work with government. They will help government to ensure that people who may be required in other places are placed in those places, and people who have certain skills that are lacking in other places will be deployed or redeployed.
All right. That was Dr. Joab speaking to me just a few months ago when this also was raised. I remember during, I think either September or so, October, this kind of thing also came out, and they were like, okay, they were going to go back to the report and all of that. Dr. Abba talked about commercializing some agencies, mergers and measures not acquisitions now. That happens in the private sector. He talked about like NTA, VON. I know my colleagues will be, looking at me somehow, but this is the economics of it, really. Agencies too many. NEPAD in South Africa has a staff of 27. NEPAD, Nigeria, 2,200. Meanwhile, the headquarters is in South Africa. So why do you think that this Orosoye report is always resurrecting time and time and time and time again?
That's Dr. Joaba is my boss, he's a nice man. When he was in BPSR, I remember actually working with him on a sort of review of that same Orosoye report. At that time, there were 520. When Orosoye wrote that report and submitted, I think 2010, 2011, there were about 521 MDAs. As we speak today, it's close to 1,000. Yeah. For every bill that is signed in the National Assembly, one new parastatal is created. So you'd have wondered, they say, when you're in a hole, you stop digging. No, not Nigeria. We'll continue to dig, all right? And of course, many of the people that are employed, they are based on nepotism and all of this thing and, references from big men and all of that. So we're not employing people there on the basis of functionality and how much value they're going to add and productivity. No. We're employing because people are connected, and that's the thing. So, but on one thing, I would actually take Joe Abba's thoughts a little bit forward, okay? To say, clearly we need to scrap some agencies, we need to merge some agencies, we need to commercialize agencies like NTA. They should be able to make their own money to fund themselves. After all, they have the biggest connection in government amongst all broadcasting houses, you know what I'm saying? So they should be able to sort themselves out. We should be able to have a dispassionate look. But again, I tell you what, if this government hadn't done this about 5 years ago, I doubt if they will be able to do it now.
Why are you so pessimistic?
No, I'm very pessimistic.
What if they shock you?
These guys shock me. I don't think these guys can shock me. I've become unshockable now as far as the Buhari government is concerned. Because a lot of low-hanging fruits that they haven't actually plucked that they could have in good time. But see, there are things that if you don't do them on time, you become estopped. It's said in law, you become estopped from even venturing. And Nigerians are becoming very agitative right now. Okay, so where do you start? If you move this way, they say, you're going to, if you do this, okay, go and cut the salary. Let us see if you're not going to have a total shutdown of the system. Okay, you can't cut the salary of people in court service. You cannot dare those who are in the lucky parastatal. You can't dare them as well, which is where many of their own children are anyway. If they could, it would be a bad idea. As a matter of fact, the guys in the court service need their salaries increased, and these other guys a little bit reduced, but they're not going to do it. I've seen things that are much easier that they could have done.
Like?
Many things that they could have done. Many things that they could have done. For example, who is doing anything about these children on the street? I'm talking about the future of Nigeria. So like I was saying earlier on, there are sectors that could take a whole lot more people. And I'm saying clearly, Nancy, that we don't need people working in secretariats, pushing files and creating problems for everybody. We need them in the villages. We need them in the grassroots. During Babangida era, in the late 80s, we had the MAMSA, okay? Mass mobilization and blah, 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 social and economic reforms. These were young people employed, sent to different places to go and talk to the people in the grassroots. Today, all our grassroots areas, they are suffering from different kind of problems. Either they are fighting, local wars or insecurity or headache crisis or whatever. The government has totally neglected them. The rest of us who, when we want to go to your village, you drive and buy things on the road, all of us, we now fly over them. That means that the businesses that they do... The
economic activities, they have been shut. And nobody's talking about that.
Saying that. We're not thinking for these people. The other day I was saying to someone, I said, we're not thinking, look, we have all these wonderful conferences at the Hilton and Sheraton and all the big places. Nobody is thinking for the small person in Nigeria. Nobody is thinking for that economy.
Okay. I think
how it works. So I think we need to repurpose these people. We can't, the government can't sack people now. You don't sack them in the middle of a pandemic, which is just about to clear up.
Okay.
So you have to repurpose them and send them elsewhere where they can be productive and useful.
I think that's the much you can take. Quite a lot of comments coming in on Twitter. Utopian Citizen has said, okay, that we'll get more insight from the guests. Lucky Pirio is saying, just when people can barely afford their meals, when other countries are raising wages after increasing fuel price plus all the loans.
And I tell you what,
Adewale
inflation
said
is crazy.
Nancy cutting salaries is bad this moment. Wrong timing for federal government.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much, Tope, for joining us on the show.
Welcome.
I've been speaking with Tope Fasua, the Chief Executive Officer at Global Analytics. We've been taking a look at a proposal by government to cut salaries or to harmonize salaries. That's the much you can take on today's edition of the program. Thank you all for joining us. I am Nancy Najibi, the best you can be and better change that you want to see. Bye now.